Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we will be building the Four Nations Cup roster for Team Canada. So the Four Nations Cup is set to take place in February, and the rosters are expected to be announced within the next 2 weeks or so. So I thought now would be as good a time as ever to build the rosters. So I'll be starting with Team Canada because that's the most talked about roster. But I will be building the other three nations over the course of the next couple days or week. So I'm using this tool on Puckpedia. It's a super cool tool where you can build a roster. You can do it for NHL teams or you can do it for national teams, which is really cool. So to start off this roster, obviously we have the 6 players who are already announced in Brad Marchand, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid, Braden Point, and Cale Makar. So these guys are already locked into place. They would have made my team obviously too. Maybe not Brad Marchand's had a bit of an off year, but he still is a part of that leadership core that Canada has. But yeah, so now I think we can build a pretty good team around these 6 players. So I'm not going to build the team that I think will actually be picked. I'm going to build the team that I would pick myself, which more than likely will look pretty similar to the actual team. So to start off, I'll start with the forwards. On the right wing, I'm going to go with Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He pretty much does everything you want out of a player. He's incredibly skilled offensively, and he's a great penalty killer, great on the power play. He faces some criticism sometimes for not showing up to playoffs, but I think he'll do just fine here, and he's an obvious pick for me. So on the left wing with Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner, I'm going to go with Matthew Barzal, who is currently injured, and he's going to be out for the next month or so. So we'll see how he plays when he comes back, or if there are any setbacks that prevent him from playing in this tournament. But I think for now you have to leave him in here. He's just an incredibly consistent player, super fast, super skilled, and is exactly the kind of player you want to have in the top 6 for Team Canada. So obviously this is going to be the second line. I built the first line just with the Nova Scotia boys because I think that's probably what they're going to do. And it makes sense. I mean, Crosby, he might not be as good as McDavid anymore, but he still will be the captain and the heart of this team. So on the third line, I've already slotted in Braden Point here. And on his left wing, I'm actually going to go with Lafreniere. Alexis Lafreniere. He had a bit of a slow start to his career. He didn't seem like your typical first overall pick. But these past 2 years, especially in the playoffs last year, he's really turned it on and shown that he can be a great player in this league. He's a big-bodied winger, super skilled, and I think if he continues at his current pace this season, he's going to be a surefire pick for this team. And then on the right wing, I'm going to go with Reinhart. Reinhart had an incredible season last year. I kind of thought it was going to be an anomaly, a flash in the pan, but he's picked up exactly where he left off last year in this season. He's once again near the top in goals, and he has looked incredible. I don't think there's any way you can leave him off this team. So yeah, I think that looks like a pretty good third line. These guys I don't think are better than anyone in the top 2 lines, so I don't think there's going to be any other nation that can compete with a third line like this. So now for the fourth line, this is a guy who's really picked it up this season, has been an incredible player, and has really helped his team get off to the quick start that not many people expected from them, and that's Mark Scheifele. 19 games, he already has 24 points. He's just a very reliable player, and I think he slots in really well here on the fourth line. I don't think a lot of people would have expected him to make this team coming into the season, but he's played his way onto it, I think. I don't know for sure that he will be selected, but in my opinion, he should be. So on his wing, I'm going to go with another injured player, but he should be back pretty soon in Mark Stone. He's a perfect fourth line player for this team, I think. He's such a responsible defensive player, and he's been pretty effective so far this season. He got off to a really hot start before his injury, and I think he slots in really nicely on this fourth line. Then in the fourth left wing spot, might be a bit of a controversial pick, but I think this is the kind of guy that Canada can use for a nice rugged fourth line, and that is Sam Bennett. You either love him or you hate him. I personally don't love him when my team has to play against him, but that's because he's a super effective pest, and he does pick up points. He's a point a game so far this season, and there's not many players in this tournament who will be able to have that same kind of grit, I think. So that rounds out the 4 lines on forward, but we do get a 13th forward, and I think there's probably a pretty obvious player, maybe a couple players who you guys would have picked that I haven't added yet, but I think the 13th forward is going to be Connor Bedard. I think he's a great player. He'll definitely be on Team Canada's for years to come, but right now I don't see where he fits into this lineup. Do you just put him on the fourth line instead of Sam Bennett, maybe? I could see that happening, but I kind of like the grit that Sam Bennett brings over Connor Bedard. He's had a bit of a rough patch lately, but I'm sure he'll turn it around, and if he finds his way into the lineup, I'm sure he can be effective. A few other guys that I thought about putting in this lineup were Steven Stamkos and Robert Thomas. Stamkos has not had the start that he's probably wanted to have this season. Obviously, I know what he brings. He's a great goal scorer, and he has a long history with Canada. But just with the way the Predators have been playing, I can't see him in this lineup. And then Robert Thomas, I was thinking of as well. He might be able to get in if Barzal's injured or if Stone's injured or someone. But he's also been injured so far this season. He just came back. He's a great player, and I could definitely see him fighting for that 13th forward spot. So moving on to the defense, I think this is a little more straightforward, actually. I think Cale Makar will be partnered up with his Colorado teammate, Devon Toews. It's an obvious pairing. They play together every night in Colorado, and they're super effective, so I don't see why they would go any other direction with that. And keeping along that same line of thought, the second D pairing I have is Alex Pietrangelo, and Shea Theodore. These guys are just great defensemen. Alex Pietrangelo's been around for a long time now. He's been super good for Canada in the past. And Shea Theodore's a great defenseman as well, and I think he just fits in really well with Pietrangelo. They already have chemistry together, and chemistry is really important, especially in these short tournaments. We've seen Canada teams in the past where they've struggled with some chemistry early on in the tournament, which has resulted in some closer games than we'd like, and even some losses. So I think if you can keep some chemistry there, it'll make a big impact. Then on the third line, we don't have a pair of teammates, but we do have 2 great defensemen in Josh Morrissey and Noah Dobson. Noah Dobson might be one of the most underrated players in the league right now. I think he's starting to get his flowers a little more recently, but he's one of the most effective defensive defensemen in the league. And obviously Josh Morrissey has been right up there at the top of the league for the past 2 years. One of the best defensemen right now. Has been the number one defenseman on a great Jets team so far this year, and he could probably move up in the lineup if they wanted to separate Makar and Tays or Pietrangelo and Theodore. But I think he slots in nicely with the defensive Dobson. And then with the 7th D, I think you have to go with Brandon Montour. He just helped Florida win a cup last year, and then he moved on to Seattle, and he's been great in Seattle too. I think he's a bona fide number one defenseman. I'm not sure they're going to take him. I could see them going with Evan Bouchard instead because of how good offensively he is. But me personally, I would not go with Bouchard because I think we have so much offensive talent already that we don't need a defensive liability on defense when you can get someone like Montour to provide a similar offensive upside but with a little bit more defensive ability. So now, moving on to probably the toughest position we have for Canada. It's not the Canada of the past where you had Carey Price, Luongo, Brodeur, Roy, all those great goalies. Canada used to be able to produce great goalies, but now we're just not what we used to be, I guess. But I think, as of right now, the best goalie that we have is Logan Thompson of the Washington Capitals. Oops, we got to change to goalie. He's had a great start to the season, as you can see. He's got 8 wins, 1 overtime loss, no regulation losses. Great goals against average, good save percentage. He's been right around these numbers his entire career with the Vegas Golden Knights beforehand. I haven't seen a lot of talk of him making the team, but I don't see how you can leave him off the team with there being so few options from Canada. So he'd be my number 1. And then number 2 and number 3 are a toss-up. I think I'd go with Binnington. He's one of the older guys that we'd have in net, and he's had his ups and downs, but he's been okay these past few years, and he's been an established number 1. So I think we take him, and I think we also take Stuart Skinner. He's also had his ups and downs. Hasn't been great this season, but this is kind of what we're left with in net for Canada. I could also see them taking Samuel Montembeault, but again, he has his ups and downs as well. He's on a bad Montreal team, so maybe his numbers would be better if he had this kind of team in front of him. But I think for now, we just have to take the guy who went to the Stanley Cup Finals last year and a guy who's been a starting goalie for however many years. So yeah, this is the team that I've built. I'm sure this won't be the exact team that Canada selects, but I think this team it definitely will be in the running to win. The other teams are going to have good teams as well, but yeah, this is a pretty stacked offense and a stacked defense. But the goalie position will be probably where things could go wrong if they do go wrong for Canada. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this team that I built, who you guys would have selected instead. You can look forward to the Team USA roster in the next couple days. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day.